two, one. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another exciting episode of Delusions of Grandeur. I am your host, David Streggy, and here in the room with me, I have my good friend KJ. How are you doing today?
Pretty good yourself, sir. Thank you for having me
Yeah,
on.
definitely. And Boris, how are you doing today?
Hi, I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
Not too bad. And Tammy, how are you doing today? You're still muted.
Fine.
Okay. So today we are going to go on about a film that I think is very important to an actor by the name of Sidney Poitier. And unfortunately, he recently passed away, and I wanted to kind of do a small tribute to him. And this film was filmed in 1968, and it was directed by Stanley Kramer. And it had a surprising amount of uh, nominations and wins. It won two Oscars. First and foremost, Best Actress in Leading Role for Katharine Hepburn, and Best Writing and Story and Screenplay by William Rose. But it also was nominated for Best Picture by Stanley Kramer, Best Actor in a Leading Role for Spencer Tracy, Best Actor in Supporting Role Cecil Kellaway, Best Actress in a Supporting Role Bea Richards, Best Director Stanley Kramer, Best Art Direction Set by Robert Clatworthy and Frank Tuttle, Best Film Editing for Robert C. Jones, and Best Music Scoring of Music Adaptation or Treatment by Frank Deval. This film definitely got a lot of attention at the time that it came out. But let us see what IMDb says about the film. A couple's attitudes are challenged when their daughter introduces them to her African American fiance. Although these days the term African American is kind of outdated in this day and age. Going over to you, KJ, was this a first time watch for you?
No, this is a film that I've seen quite a few times. I saw it at a pretty young age, and it's been a movie that's kind of followed me through, much of my teenage years into my 20s. It was a film that, of all the films that you would have probably seen back then, I thought it was the one that probably aged the best. Because the topics in the movie are still topics that people are talking about today. They're still dealing with today. Even though I think, interracial marriage or relationships, I think it's a little bit more of the norm now, a little bit more accepted. But you still have those people who raise the eyebrow, raise the question to it. So I think this movie is just a very, very timeless film, very timeless.
Okay. Going over to you, Tammy, was this the first time watch for you?
Yeah, it was the first time watching it. I thought it brought definitely the subject of the interracial to light, and I agree with KG that still it's still a thing today. Not as prevalent as it was then, but it's still definitely a thing today.
Okay. Heading over to you, Boris. Was this a first time watch for you?
Yes, it was my first time, and I must say I enjoyed this movie actually more than I thought I would because, as you all know, this is not the kind of movie I would normally choose. As you know, I'm much more into supernatural horror, things like that. I'm generally I'm generally not very interested in stories revolving around this universe issues, to put it that way. But this one actually ended up being pretty good. I think it had a pretty good combination of humor and drama, and it had a message at the end that I really liked. So, yeah, like I said, I ended up enjoying it much more than I expected.
Okay. And no, this is not my first time watching the film. I've at least seen the film at least 3 or 4 times growing up, because I've grown to have a respect for certain actors, and Sidney Poitier, for the longest time of the 50s and 60s, kind of dominated the African American screen, sort of with his roles. And though this is not my favorite film involving Sidney, um, Sidney Poitier always made an entrance whenever he when he was like the Will Smith of the screen at the time, or the actually Will Smith isn't exactly a good reference. I would actually put Morgan Freeman.
Ooh.
Morgan Freeman is a phenomenal actor. So is Denzel. So I would have to say if you combine like Denzel and Freeman in a role, you'd get Sidney. In a sense.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah, that's good.
um,
Yeah.
well, those are two phenomenal actors. So to me, it's like seeing him on screen is something to behold. And I think he brought a lot of what was going on at that point in time to the table. And I don't think that these issues were entirely expressed, you know, as fully as they were in this film. So, but the name of the film is called "Guess Who's Coming to Dinner." So let us look at the characters while we're at it. The film begins as a couple is evidently coming in on an airplane, and I believe we have Joanna. Well, why don't we talk about Joanna as an actress? How did you portray her as a character, KJ?
I think that she was very good. I think that was actually I think her name was Catherine Holtonton or something around those lines. I think that was her first movie, but she was the niece of Catherine. Hepburn. And for a newcomer coming into a movie with three established people, like Spencer Tracy, Hepburn, and Portier, I mean, that can be intimidating. But I guess it was good in the sense that since that was the niece of Captain Hepburn, there was already a relationship there. So I thought that she was very good, in her scenes. Um, I thought she brought that youthful energy that was pretty big at that time, because she was a open-minded thinker when in 1967. I mean, it was slowly becoming a thing to be open-minded, but I thought she did a very good job portraying it.
Okay. Heading over to you, Tammy. What did you think about Joanna as a character?
I thought she was good. Um, definitely, a little hyper compared to her parents. When you meet the parents later, um, at the for being new and like KG said, with having people that were more established actors around her and everything, I think she did a good job. Her personality was really something else, but
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I'll get into what I think in a moment once I get Boris's thoughts on on what did you think about Joanna as a character? That would be the intended female fiance.
Well, she was definitely very good looking. The actress did a good job playing the role. That's not even a question. Now, as far as the character goes, she was okay, pretty interesting. The only thing I would like to point out is that she was a bit. I'm sorry, I can't remember the English word for a person who makes decisions a bit too quickly. What's the English word for that? Remind me, please.
Would naive be a good word for it?
Uh, maybe I don't know, but what I was going to say is,
Pretentious,
you,
pretentious, maybe.
mm, maybe I'm not sure, but yeah, I was going to say she actually knew this guy for only 10 days, and she was already so certain that she wanted to marry him. I mean, in this story, they put the emphasis on them being of different races, but I don't even think that's an issue. But the fact is, she knew him for only 10 days. They couldn't really say they knew each other as persons. So I thought that was maybe a bit of an unrealistic aspect of the movie if they had only omitted the detail of them knowing each other for only 10 days. If it was, I don't know, a month or two, then it would have been a little more realistic. But aside from that, everything was okay, I think.
I think the first time that I had actually seen this, I didn't understand the storyline. But as I got older, the more that I saw this, I felt like the character was a little bit naive myself, a bit pretentious because I guess I guess the myth has always been that you should actually know your significant lover that you are going to spend the rest of your life with, like for a
Well,
much longer time before you even
well,
decide to get hitched and get married or even
well,
try. I mean, there is an age of chivalry that sometimes is lost on couples where uh, uh, um, the art of wooing, a woman is kind of like something that is of days long past, where you actually, date her a couple of times, and then you get to meet the parents and things of that nature. But I think the thing that's most respectful of this couple is that they thought of they thought of their parents, even though it was on the spry and on the sudden, like it was. They thought of their parents so much they wanted their blessing before they got married, and that's what they were attempting to do. What do we think about the good doctor, played by Sidney Poitier? Um, uh, KJ, what did you think about Sidney Poitier's character?
His character, I think, well, I wondered this. I tried to look it up, but I couldn't really find anything. It almost seems as if his character was modeled after him, in a sense. Um, Very distinguished man. Um, a man with a very reputable trade. He was a doctor. Um, and I don't know, he had a very dignified approach to himself. The way that he spoke, the way that he didn't act as if he was somebody who didn't deserve to be someplace because of his color. Even when he goes up to the house and he meets the parents, he doesn't wither. He's cautious. I'll use that word. He's cautious when he meets them, but he doesn't, wither away, when he meets them, because he's so worried about his color. And I thought that was very good. I thought it was very interesting, but I also thought it was very important because it was showing, African Americans even at that time that, you shouldn't feel as if you're less than and act like that when you're around different people or around Caucasian people, for instance. But I thought he was a great character. I thought he was a great representation of a black man who knows who he is as a person, So I thought it was good. I thought it was very good.
And I don't think that he really quite knew what he was like in the start of the film. It wasn't until like he was like standing in front of his father until he knew exactly who he was, as a man. Because the reason why I say that is because the first thing he does is he goes and he after meeting her parents, he takes them aside and says, "Hey, the marriage is not even happening until we get your approval." So to me, that tells me he doesn't know what kind of man he is. Up until like a certain point in the film.
Yeah, I guess I kind of see where you're coming from. I'll just say this. I think in that instance where he told the parents that he wasn't going to marry her, I think in his eyes he just didn't want problems. I think that was really just where he was coming from. Because I think in the movie he's a widower. I think so. He was already married beforehand. So I think that he just didn't want problems in his life even further. Because if they said no, then I'm not gonna bother. I'm not gonna bother pushing it further. But no, I totally understand that. Because when he sees his father at the end, they had that conversation. I think he realizes I don't want to end up like this. I don't.
Definitely. Going over to you, Tammy. What do you think about John Prentice as a character?
I think he is very well spoken, very confident in himself. I don't. I think that he is. Well, we'll hear him say it later, but he's told his father in a later time that he doesn't look at himself as a black man. He looks at himself as a man, and that's definitely how he carries himself right from the beginning. He doesn't, you know, he doesn't like doesn't give off any vibe or anything that he thinks he's any different or any lower class or anything. Right when he comes in the house, he is just as good as everybody around him, and he should be, and he should feel that way. And he definitely acts that way. He doesn't act like he's any better, but he acts like he belongs there, he fits there, and he's just as good as everybody around him. And he exudes that confidence, not in an arrogant way either, just in a confident way.
Okay. Going over to you, Boris. What are your thoughts on John Prentice as a character?
Well, for the most part, I agree with Tammy and KJ. I really liked the scene near the end when he stood up against his father and said everything he did. That was really great. The only issue I have with his character is this beginning where he said that. If Joanna's parents didn't approve of the marriage wouldn't happen at all. And I don't even have an issue with that because their approval was so important to him, but because he said that Joanna didn't even know that they wouldn't get married if they didn't get their approval, which meant he wasn't entirely honest with the person he supposedly loved. As he said, she thinks we will get married no matter what, but no, if we don't get your approval, then it's not happening. And she didn't know that. And if he supposedly loved her, then in my opinion, he should have been entirely honest with her without any lies, without any dishonesty about anything. That would be my only issue with him. Otherwise, everything is pretty much as Tammy and KJ said.
Well, I think we'll talk about the other characters as we mosey along in this plot, because the plot begins with them making a trip to meet her parents. It's not necessarily meet the parents just yet. It's meet her parents, and so she decides to, on a whim, without even like contacting her parents or whatnot, go to her mother's art gallery. And I thought the art gallery was an interesting scene because I thought that one piece of art that had those like intricate like electronic things, that was kind of unique. But it was a high society art gallery. You could definitely tell it was, something that was a prestigious art gallery, where
Yeah.
and her mother wasn't there, so she ended up leaving a message. But while there, you could definitely tell that the curator at the time, was her name Suzanne? I think her name was. I think her name was Suzanne at the time.
Sorry, who are you talking about again?
The initial lady that they ran into at the art gallery.
It wasn't it Hillary, I think.
Yeah, Hillary. There we go. Hillary, which she kind of reacted to, I guess, John's presence there, and but Joanna is who she is, so she just acted like nothing was wrong or anything like that, and to be honest, in this day and age, you would think that there wouldn't be anything wrong, but at this point in time, if a colored man was in fact having a relationship with a white woman, it wasn't exactly well thought of. It was kind of a taboo thing. Still at that point in time, and
Yep.
and it wasn't as popular as an item, among both sides, because you could see both reactions throughout the film. But they ended up arriving at her family's estate, and I guess the first person that they come across is their nanny, or at least her nanny. What did you think about her nanny, KJ? What did you think about her as a person?
I thought she was very much like anyone who has developed such a relationship with a child who they've watched literally from the time they were a baby grow up. She was very protective of her. And I understood it. Even with that scene where she confronts Sidney, she was very, aggressive. It was comedic, to watch. But I just love the actress's delivery. When she gets all up in his face, And then she leaves the room and she says, "You're not even all that good looking." I mean, that was funny to me, but
her instances were funny. I mean,
funny.
the fact
Yeah,
that she was willing to say, I understand civil rights, but this is ridiculous," you
right,
know.
right. But she also painted a certain picture too, and that was, you see that even when you go back to movies like with Gone with the Wind with Hattie McDaniel. I mean, she was very much in that similar vein. She was somebody who she didn't want to cause problems her own self. And I use that word problems. She didn't want to, stir anything. And she viewed Poitier's character like a lot of, the young blacks, young African Americans at that time who were, you know, becoming more vocal, more active, in their way of expressing themselves. So I understood, her character and where she came from, but the actors did a great
Well,
job.
yeah, in those days, I hate to say this, but when you were brought up as a colored person in this world, you knew your place, you knew your station in life. Yeah,
Right.
you know what I mean.
You,
It was a
you were
way of
you were
life.
labeled. You were labeled. You were the worker. You were the maid. You were the person who did X, Y, and Z. Quote unquote. I mean, they basically forced people into roles. Roles that became societal roles. And it's a shame, but that's what happened at that time. You know.
No, yeah, most definitely. So let's go over to you, Boris. What did you think about the maid and what she brought to the film as a character?
Uh, well, actually, this time I must say I don't quite agree with KJ. I thought it was rather bizarre of her to have a problem with what John was doing. I mean, he was a man who stood up for equality between black people and white people, and the way she treated him, especially since the beginning, it was like she was trying to say, no, we shouldn't be equal. We black people are inferior to white people. We are here to serve them. And I was like, what the hell? You are a black person yourself. You should be admiring him, not criticizing him for what he's doing. So I thought that was kind of strange of her. I mean, she should have been on his side when it comes to the problem with the whole issue of people of color uh, getting involved with white people. She should have definitely been on his side there. So I thought her attitude was rather bizarre.
I agree with you.
And And one funny thing I would like to say, I noticed when her full name was mentioned, Matilda Binks, it reminded me of Jar Jar Binks from Star Wars. And I remembered how much people hate that character, although I never really found him as annoying as many people say. But whenever she was criticizing John for something, I was like, "Oh my! If Jar Jar Binks was here instead of you, that would have been less annoying."
No, totally. Obviously,
so,
to his
so
point. Oh, go ahead.
Tammy, um, what did you think about the maid and as a character and what she had to bring to the film?
I thought you right off the bat you could tell how much she really cared about Joanna. I thought she was a little abrupt though. I mean, against John. You know, um, she's of color, he's of color, and the way she acted towards him at first was like I thought was just a little abrupt. I can kind of probably understand her way of thinking because of at the time, like you said, the stations in life, and where you're a nanny or you're this or you're that, and that's how she was brought up. So to have this black gentleman come in and say, and be with the young white girl that she basically helped raise. I can understand where she was coming from, but she was really, I thought, quite abrupt. She, you know, give you know, I thought she should have at least given him a chance to speak his piece and get to know who he was. That he wasn't just out for this or out for that. That there was really something there between the two of them. You know.
As far as the maid goes, I do think that she was rather abrupt and rather negative towards John at first, probably more than she needed to be. But then again, I'm not quite
Definitely.
sure how close this was to the whole civil rights movement, and because this was 1968, this was not too far from Rosa Parks and the Martin Luther King movement and the things that were happening on the outside of the world in the black movement, and I mean, it's not too far stretched from those moments in history. So, to me, since those, shall I say, situations were very much prevalent at the moment, and still being talked about, I feel like that had a prelude to this movie too, or held precedence over this movie too. Where there was more freedom of speech with colored people, and but and I think that kind of is the whole liberal front that the father has. Oh, let's talk about the mother here.
But see, in 1968, David, things were still very, very, very relevant.
Yeah. I mean, 68 is when King died, So, I mean, it's one of those things where, you're in the heat, you're actually in the heat of the civil rights movement, when this film came. I think this film came out in 67, actually. It's the heat of that time, what I mean? It was daring to do this, because one thing I'm going to say, to the point that you and Boris have made is about that character, I don't agree with her, but I would say I understand her mindset. And I say that from the standpoint of when you've been taught or you've been forced to think a certain kind of way for a long time, I mean, you are most likely going to conform to it. She was, in a sense, institutionalized to think that I'm just a maid. I take care of this baby, and, that's my job. I'm not going to try and stir anything up to lose my position in life.
I get that, and I understand stand that, but I do think for this particular situation, she didn't need to be as negative as she was. I mean, she definitely deserved to have some stand point and some vocal aspect of being that person to stand behind and in defense of her charge that she had watched since she was a child. So she definitely deserved a voice, at least in her well-being. And I think being made and being someone who was very prevalent in her life, she was very much a parent, just like her parents to her. So people forget about that aspect when you've got someone else bringing you up. You don't just have one or two parents, you have like three or four.
That's true.
I did have to mention that I think there was another maid or something like that was very pretty, who ended up showing up at that moment, and for some reason I enjoyed the dancing that her and the delivery boy were doing, the jive dancing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that was nice. I think the 15 thing to do in the movie.
Well, I thought it was cool because I thought it was like bringing in that whole rock music aspect of the 50s and 60s. How people were listening to the radio a lot, and you saw that down at the hop that they went to have ice cream just a little bit. Um, but yeah. What do we think about Katharine Hepburn's character as the mother? KJ, what did you think?
I thought she was wonderful. I like Hepburn as an actress, but the character, I think the character truly is like the definition of a progressive, kind of a woman, a liberal type of woman. I mean, I don't know how to say. She was a strong-willed woman, which was very nice to see at that time, which was still dominated by men. I mean, she's a strong woman who had her own business, had her own thing. And I think out of all of them, she was the most understanding. And I say that even though she was kind of shocked by it all. I mean, she was. She was probably the most understanding when it was brought to her attention. I mean, she actually put some thought behind it until later on when the father finally does realize it his own self. But she was good. I always like that scene where she confronts Hillary in that car. And she basically tells her, you can collect your time. Basically after all the comments that she made toward the relationship between her daughter and Poitier's character. I thought she was great.
Oh yeah, every time I see that scene, I have to laugh because the way she says it and the way she puts it just makes her sputter, like spin her wheels just a little bit.
She does it one time, but she gets her point out. Just so good. I mean, yeah. Okay.
What did you, Tammy, think of Joanna's mother?
I thought that she was she was very like a refined person, but she had a lot of thought and feelings behind what was going on, and still wanted to listen to her daughter. She thought a lot of how her daughter felt at the time, but I think she was still mixed in her heart and in her mind about the whole situation. And I think she was trying to think of everything all at once. She was trying to think of society and how they would react, her daughter and how she felt, John and how he felt, her husband and how he was going to feel. I think she was kind of like overwhelmed at first because she had all these thoughts, I think, at the time about what was actually going on. But I think I think she tried to put on a brave face and do what she needed to do because, she wanted to be there for her daughter.
Okay. Heading over to you, Boris. What did you think about Joanna's mother as a character?
I thought she was great, honestly. As you have mentioned, this scene when she saw John for the first time and her facial expression, she just went completely silent, but her face was saying 1,000 words, and what that actress did there with just her silence, how much she said without saying a word. It was just hilarious and so well done, and that was great. Now, as far as the character goes, yeah, she was one of the first who came to terms with her daughter being in a relationship with a person of another race, and
She
yeah, she was.
definitely had more time than the rest.
Yeah, she was definitely very good, and yeah, as you said, she expresses some progressive views throughout the story, which I think is great, and also one thing I liked about both her and her husband as characters is that uh, throughout the story they show us the difference between having some moral values in theory and actually applying those moral values when those things you preach appear directly in your life and you actually find yourself having to live by what you preach, and how sometimes it can maybe be more difficult than it originally seems, but you have to come to terms with it if you want to have enough integrity as a person to actually live the way you tell others to live. And I thought that was a very interesting aspect of the movie. And yeah, it took her husband a bit longer than it took her to come to terms with it. But yeah, we will get to him later. And yeah, as far as she goes, like I said, she was really good.
And then, of course, we have the great Spencer Tracy, who is playing the role of Joanna's father. What did we think about him? And I'll talk about my thoughts about her and him together when I get a chance here. But KJ, what did you think about Spencer Tracy's character as her dad?
Spencer Tracy might be, and I love Sidney Poitier and and all, but Spencer Tracy is the reason I watched this movie, and I have to be honest there because I don't know, he's the rock, he's the foundation, his character of this whole film. Because even though he doesn't explicitly say it in the movie, I think at first he's kind of offended or outraged by the thought of, is his daughter literally serious? Is she serious about doing this? Even though he doesn't show it, that blatantly. He's very taken aback by it, even more so than, Hepburn. And throughout the whole movie, he's having to constantly play in his head, the scenario. But
Yeah.
also the thing is, everything that he stood for, everything that has been said about him. Because if you remember in the movie early on, they speak about his character quite a bit, but we don't see him yet until he makes his entrance. But we're painting him as this very progressive thinking guy who is supposed to, when he see a situation like this, be pretty okay with it, at least more okay with it than what we actually see from him. So it was great to watch him go through a change throughout the whole movie and actually have to confront, as Boris said earlier, the morals and the ideals of which not only has been talked about for him, but the things that he actually even believes in. There's a favorite scene of mine that I'll talk about later, with that. But that's how I feel about him. He's a great character. Great character.
Okay. What about you, Boris? What did you think about Spencer Tracy as the character of the father?
I found him very interesting. As I said earlier, I like the way they portrayed in this movie how, in some people's cases, it comes easier for them to actually live by the ideals they stand for, and to some other people, it comes a little more difficult, and he was definitely one who had a harder time learning to live by what he generally stands for. And I thought it was interesting how he had this roller coaster of the way he perceived John throughout the story. There was a part where he seemed fairly okay with him, then there was a part where he became more against his relationship with Joanna. At that point, I thought he was a bit of an asshole, and I didn't even understand what had suddenly made him decide to oppose the relationship. But then near the end, it somewhat made sense when it turned out that he wasn't opposing it because he had a problem with John being a person of color, but because he was concerned about how their relationship might affect them and what kind of people they might run into in their future, and how they might be affected by the whole thing, which I think is a fairly realistic concern. But still, of course, I thought it was wrong when he wanted to oppose their relationship. But in the end, he ended up learning that he was wrong, and I really liked the speech he held at the end. But we will probably talk more about that. But yeah, the that final speech is definitely what redeems him as a character, and makes him a very realistic character, and one that actually did deserve respect after all.
And Tammy, what did you think about Spencer Tracy as the character of Joanna's father?
Tammy, you're
Well, I
muted.
do agree with KJ that he's like the rock, of this family and everything. And I think that he was struck with basically doing everything that he stands for. All of a sudden it's right there. Okay, he's brought her up that, color isn't a thing. Now he has to face that. He has brought her up that people, everybody's equal. Now he has to face that. And he's also looking long term. Even if he doesn't have an objection to the two of them being together, but what is society going to do? How are they going to look at them? How are they going to treat them? And how are they going to treat their children? He is looking at all of this and trying to be as objective as he can as a person and as a father and as a figure in society.
And I have to agree with you Tammy. He's struck with all of these things, and the biggest thing that is probably on his mind is he doesn't want his baby hurt. He doesn't want his daughter to hurt through this whole process, and he's thinking about the longer term. Uh, what is it? The what ifs. The what if she does get married? What are people going to think? And I don't think he's entirely thinking about her feelings in the whole process. He's not thinking about his wife's feelings in the whole process. He's thinking about the way the world is right now in this current atmosphere of, probably the whole civil rights thing that's going on at this moment. Is that something that he wants to happen in his family? That kind of ridicule, and I know that he brought his daughter up to be the person that she is, and I love that little moment that him and his wife have between each other, where she basically tells him that we didn't tell her not to, we didn't tell her not to date or marry a colored a person. We encouraged her to think that there was nothing wrong with the color of anyone else's skins, and it's when you're faced with everything that's been passed down to you from generation to generation, a way of thinking, that there is something wrong if someone's not white, or if someone has a different color skin. And that's something, unfortunately, that still it holds prevalence on today's matters. I mean, we shouldn't be able to have to go outside of the house and worry that we're going to be called a white person, or UKJ. You're going to go outside your home and be called a black person. We shouldn't have to deal with these types of things, but these are the types of things that went on at this point in time, and these are the things that he's thinking, may happen to an extent where there will be problems down the line. But that being said, this whole relationship has gone pretty fast. They've known each other 10 days. Oh, and I should mention the Monsignor Ryan. He's a laughable character. He's a Catholic priest that is a friend of the family, and he's definitely got an interesting way of looking at things. And they're definitely not like Christian or anything like that. And I like his being in the film for the specific reason of being that voice of reason, that voice of common sense, through the whole thing. I mean, the reason why the father had a golf game and he canceled it because it was with him. So he came over and he wrangled a dinner invitation, and I guess the situation got a little faster in the fact that they John and Joanna had dinner with friends, who suggested with her to her that why doesn't she just leave and go with him, and then they get back and they end up inviting the parents to dinner, and that's when we get the famous line of Katharine Hepburn, "Oh, guess who's coming to dinner?" So, what do we think about the situation as it stands? When you heard that the opposite parents were coming to dinner, what did you think? Starting with you, KJ.
Well, when I heard that the opposite parents are coming, um, I would say my first thought was more or less there could be fireworks, you know, um, sure, but I guess it was really going to put the Captain Hepburn and Spencer Tracy characters. It was also going to put them in a very peculiar position because now you really are going to have to stand on your morals that you quote unquote believe in. And for me, I thought two of the best scenes in the movie was the one scene where his mother, Sidney Poitier's mother, speaks to Spencer Tracy. That was a very, very good scene. And also the scene when Sidney talks to his father. I mean, we got two very great scenes that came out of, the opposite parents also coming to dinner. And the scene with Sidney, his father, is the one that, as a black man, I really take the most out of all the scenes of this movie. Because it's the crux of, you know what? Yes, this is the way that a generation of people once thought, which also includes the babe from what we were talking about earlier. There are generations of people who were taught and they were shown to think a certain kind of way about themselves. And then you have this new generation, that is not going to conform to that. So I thought that was a peculiar situation, but we really got, as viewers, we really got some great material out of what we saw there.
I have to agree with you there. I mean, we really got to see a different side of the parenting point of view, where with Sydney's or with John's father, evidently we learned that he was a milkman, a retired milkman, and he seemed to be a very stoic, very prideful man, head of his family. and he seemed to think that his son owed him, owed him a lot to what he fought for in his life.
I mean, and let's not forget too. I mean, I think one of the lines in the script was, Sidney acknowledges the fact that it was through his hard work that got him to college. For him to even become a doctor, quote unquote. So, I totally understand the father's. I understand his POV, but I disagree with him. Because I think that's what the movie really was kind of going at, was just, look, this is a new generation, a generation that does not necessarily owe the old generation anything, including even an explanation as to why they want to get married. They're adults, So that's just my point of view on that.
Well, yeah, they're both independent, consenting adults, and they should be able to feel, breathe, and live their lives the way that they want to live them. And if they want to make mistakes, let them make those mistakes.
Right.
So,
like Captain Hepburn with Joey, they were talking about, have you been with this guy? And she says to the mother, she's like, well, no. She's like, no, but that's because he didn't want to. That didn't mean I didn't want to, but I just thought that was a funny scene. But that's risky in 1967. That's risky.
Yes, definitely. Going over to you, Boris, what did you think about when the opposing parents were coming to dinner?
I'm sorry, I had a glitch. Could you please repeat the question?
What did you think about when you heard that the opposing parents were coming to dinner? The other, the colored parents were coming to dinner.
Yeah. Well, I found it somewhat ironic that throughout the movie it was Joanna's father's approval that seemed to be the most important, but then in the end, the other father ended up being the one causing more drama than her father. So that was kind of funny, but one thing I liked about the whole part of the story with those two is that wait, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I lost the thread of what I was going to say.
Sounds like you were talking about the possible situation between John Prentice and his father. There was.
Yeah. One thing I really like in this story is that they touched on this subject as people often say, even nowadays, you owe everything to your parents. If it wasn't for them, you wouldn't exist either. And actually, I was rather positively surprised that in a movie that was made at this time, so many years ago, they mentioned that subject and that John tells his father, no, I don't know you anything because you brought me into this world because you wanted to do it, not because I asked you to do it. That's something that many people wouldn't say even nowadays, but it's something that I really agree with, and I thought it was really interesting and really cool that they included that in the movie.
Especially since there are so many situations that come about where sometimes the births weren't planned. It just happened,
Yeah.
I mean, but in that day and age, parents planned to have the birth of children. It was a plan to make a baby. It was a plan to do this. It wasn't a spur of the moment thing. where suddenly, oh, we have a bouncing baby boy, So
Yeah, and I I just remembered the other thing I wanted to say. When John stood up against his father, I found it really interesting how the father at first he was like he had this sense of superiority, like this self-righteous attitude, like only he knew what's good, and as if John was wrong, no matter what he says, as long as he doesn't obey and doesn't agree. And I found it interesting to notice that if John took a more humble attitude, if he was more like begging for his father's approval, he probably wouldn't have gotten it. But instead, he stood his ground and he was like, "No, you can't tell me what to do. I know what I'm doing with my life, and no matter what you say, I will do what I feel is right," and that in turn snapped the father out of this false sense of superiority and made him realize he couldn't really dominate his son that way anymore. And then he actually started to act more like a normal person. So that was an aspect of this story that I found quite interesting.
I guess who's coming to dinner?
I found it very interesting. A couple things I wanted to say that'll go into how I feel about the parents is I was born in 1972, and my mom and her family still had a lot of the not good ideals about this time. My mom and her family still definitely were very prejudiced. My mom had little nicknames for if you were Italian or if you were Chinese or if you wore a turban or if you were a color. Everybody had their not nice little nicknames. And I was brought up um, that I was not, that I was supposed to be like them. Okay. I wasn't supposed to like anybody of color or anybody like this or anybody like, and Um, fortunately for me, I'm very stubborn and I don't follow a lot of things that people say. So I disregarded all of that, and it caused quite a lot of friction, especially when I was going to school where I was the minority, and my mother wanted me to think and act like her. And I looked at her the one day and I said, "Would you like me to come home?" So
Well,
this time and time was so controversial. I mean, I was born in it, but but I understand that people still had that nasty way.
Oh, she'll be back.
um,
I know that I have worked in. I worked for Popeyes for 5 years, and I know that working amongst the latter color, oftentimes some of their minds sets. No offense to you, KJ, were still against my race. But
Okay, I think
here
I'm
she is.
back.
welcome
Yes.
back.
No,
So
trust.
saying that and thinking that and realizing what things were like at that time, I do understand where the father was coming from. And I understand where John was coming from. John was not trying to be disrespectful, even though his father took it as disrespectful at first. But John was trying to show that he believed that this was a new generation and a new way of thinking, and that people were going to come around and start changing their ideals and their way of thinking and start accepting. And I think John was trying to portray that to his father. And I think the mother, John's mother, already was starting to feel that with John's way of thinking. And his mother could sympathize with, she could see that they were in love. And Katharine Hepburn's character and John's mother, you could tell when they talked that the two women, how they felt about their children. They could see the love between their children. They understood the things of society and the problems that they might face, but they looked at it from a different way. They looked at it that love can conquer all. Where the two fathers, they looked at it as more of what are they going to encounter in the world? How are people going to treat them? And they were more worried about them getting hurt in that sense. And they weren't looking at that love could conquer all. They were looking at how is this going to affect their lives? How are people going to treat them? You know, and so that was very, very moving when John basically stood up to his father. That was a very, very moving part. But he was right. And his father was right in his own rights too, because that's what he believed in, and that's how he had gotten to this point in his life. But he needed to let John get to this is the point in life he's at. So
Well, yeah. When you bring up a child and you make sure that they have clothes on their back, you start thinking that that person eventually owes something to them for making sure that their life was sheltered and that they had a roof over their head and things of that nature. And I see that from that point. But I'm glad that you brought up the conversation that Katharine Hepburn's character had with John's mother. But there was another conversation that I think was very important. The conversation that she, in fact, had with Spencer Tracy's character, where he just kind of listened, and she said that she thinks that men just get old, and they get old in those frames of mind to a sense where they forget what it was like to be young and in love and to be in love. And I think in a sense she was speaking of her own husband because she may think that he has lost some of that love for her, or even lost maybe like she's I think she's speaking of her husband, but in reality the words were setting into his character, and that's when he comes back with that phenomenal speech where I think you told me this in this way, Tammy, that he doesn't he mentions everything that happened that evening that brought him to this point. He gets in and he thinks that something's wrong, from the nanny, the maid. So he comes in thinking something is wrong right away, and that's why I think it's a good thing that he brings the nanny in on the whole conversation, because then she hears what happened too, because everyone involved he mentions right on down the line. And then of course KJ, did you have something to say on this a particular speech that he makes?
Yeah, monologues probably put on film. I mean, I can't think of many others that rival that one. And then the fact of the matter is that, the actor Spencer Tracy died like 2 weeks after doing it. So that's one of the last thing we'll ever get to see of him. In terms of that scene. But I was going to mention another scene, which I thought was pretty important to him coming to the conclusion that he came to, and that was the scene where they go out to get ice cream. Him and his wife, they drive to a place to get ice cream, and he's really getting fed up. The whole day has been a headache for him, and on the drive back home, you can see it in his face that he doesn't like the change that's happening around him. And
Yeah.
it goes to what Sidney's mother said to him about men just getting old. We're getting old. You see a lot of change, and for people who are so used to certain things, it can be scary, almost traumatizing to
Yeah, 'cause
watch.
didn't he back up into a colored person's car?
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, yeah, he did. It can be a traumatizing thing, and like you said, him backing into that car. I mean, he lost his bearings. It can be hard. And at that time, that was a time for change. We like movies, all of us. 1967 is really when you can kind of say, like, things are changing. The old Hollywood is gone. We're going in a different direction. You saw that, especially in the 70s, just going in a different direction. So I thought that was a very big scene, for Spencer's character, because that's when everything becomes to a boil for him.
Most assuredly. Going over to you, Boris. What did you think about that final speech of Spencer Tracy's character?
That final speech was definitely amazing. As I said earlier, that was the scene that redeems him as a character after some scenes earlier when most people would say he was kind of wrong at what he was saying. Here in the end, he makes everything right with this speech, and it would probably be one of my favorite scenes in the movie. And one thing I really liked about the speech is that they didn't go for the cliche ending when someone who was to a certain extent an antagonist throughout the movie like radically change his views and becomes completely the opposite of what they stood for at the beginning. But he was more like I. I thought you might run into problems in your future, and I still think so. And but instead of how do I say it? Instead of giving the approval they all wanted him to give, he was like, "I may not entirely agree with it, but you don't really need my approval. If you two love each other, then my opinion doesn't really matter so much." And that was, I would say, the best thing he could have possibly said about that situation. And that was why eventually I really respected him as a character.
Yep. And this is what he said at that point in time. Now, Mr. Prentice, clearly a most reasonable man, says he has no wish to offend me, but wants to know if I'm some kind of a nut. And Mrs. Prentice says that, like her husband, I'm a burned out old shell of a man who cannot even remember what it's like to love a woman the way her son loves my daughter. And strange as it seems, that's the first statement made to me all day, which I am prepared to take issue, because I think you're wrong. You're as wrong as you can be. I admit that I hadn't considered it, hadn't even thought about it, but I know exactly how he feels about her, and there's nothing, absolutely nothing that your son feels for my daughter that I didn't feel for Christina. Old, yes. Burned out, certainly, but I can tell you the memories are still there. Clear, intact, indestructible, and they'll be there if I live to be 110. So, Tammy, What did you think about that last final statement of Mr. Drayton's?
Tammy,
I liked his whole ending speech. I thought it was right on the money. He addressed something from what everybody said. He addressed when he first came in the door and the nanny. He addressed how he felt about his wife and how she felt about things and her
Oh yeah,
comments.
that's right.
You know, he took a little bit of what everybody said and what everybody felt and put it into that speech. And then it came down to, he basically did say it was up to them. Okay. But he did it in such a way that he didn't single anybody out about their feelings or things. He said he brought a little bit of what everybody was thinking and feeling to that speech and made everybody think about the whole situation. I thought it was great.
Well, yeah, because sometimes details are lost in the whole process, and I think I like the fact that he brings up what all happened that day, so that it brings to light, you know, the manner in which everything was brought to them, and I mean, honestly, it was basically all an abrupt situation. It was a very quick situation that was brought to their attention. They had to make a decision on it, like lickety split, you know. And it's not that type of a situation that you can just, you know, just make a quick decision. At least in that day and age, with that tough of a concept, it wasn't a decision that could be entirely made all at once. And unfortunately, I think actually, to his fortune, I think he actually had some time to think about it more. And he was a very good thinker through, even though he was stubborn to a point. He was able to hear everything that was said to him, whether or not he liked to admit any of it was right at that point in time is another thing. But he was a listener, which I think is something that Christina, his wife, one of the reasons why she married him, you know, the fact that he was a listener, you know. So I think it came to his favor in the end, and ultimately he is the saving grace of the whole film, because he is, said, and I know it'll take some time with your father, but I'm sure with our help they'll come to terms with it, you know. But all in all things considered, what did y'all think of the film at the end of everything? Do you think it holds prevalence to this day? Does it hold present presence now as well as then? What about you, KJ?
I think it holds up very well compared to today's movie. The topic is one that hasn't really gone away. You know, I think someone said this earlier. I think it might have been Tammy. You know, it's still around. It's just not as relevant as it once was. You know, with so many people being born to different races. You know, it's a melting pot in the U.S. like never before. So I think it does have a lot of staying power. The humor, maybe not, but the social issue is still very prevalent.
Well, and I think if someone were to see this film as of now, I know the word Negro was said several times throughout the film. I know that wouldn't hold as much in this day and age, but I think it was said to an extent of like respect at that point in time instead of being an insult per se. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Uh,
No, I totally agree with you there. But I mean, but that's the terminology at that time, you know. It's the
Yeah.
terminology at that time.
But let's talk about the production value of this film. What did you think about the production value of this film, KJ? And then I'll go on to the others.
Oh, I thought the production was excellent. I mean, Hepburn, she had some very nice outfits that she wore throughout the film. Um, you know, I mean, the production was great. If anything, bad about the production, you know, it was what I would expect for somebody who would come from I guess the upper middle class, maybe borderline wealthy, type of a family. You know, it was nice.
Yeah. Going over to you, Boris. What did you think about the production of this film?
I, I thought it was pretty good. Yeah, as KJ says, there were some really good-looking costumes involved and so on. Now, as far as some special effects and some things like that go, they weren't really needed much here since nothing out of this world was happening in this story, so everything could be done at least as far as the visual goes, everything was able to be done pretty much realistically, so it was okay. I think I don't have anything to complain about.
Okay. What about you, Tammy? What did you think about the production and the sets and the design of the sets and stuff like that?
I thought it was really good. I think it was very much set for the time, and the wardrobe that everybody had was I think fitting for the time, their class, where they were and everything. So I think they did a good job.
Okay. And I liked the setting of the place in which that Joanna's family lived. I wouldn't have minded having a place like that. It had a nice little veranda out back where there was a nice little like sunset going on there. I liked that backdrop, even though I knew that that was probably a screen in the background. But it definitely was a product of its time, and I did think that Joanna's mom definitely had several different flares of dresses. Of course, Katharine Hepburn, I think at that age would have. And I know that I've enjoyed Katharine Hepburn's performances in several different films. Rooster Cogburn, African Queen. These are two performances that I remember besides this one. But I have to kind of harken back to the one that you told me once we get to our favorites, KJ, because one of my favorites is definitely definitely the moment where she fires Hillary. That to me was like shows me the iron that Katharine Hepburn's characters can have. But I have to say that my favorite scene is Sidney Poitier, John Prentice's lines to his father, and the whole Spencer Tracy speech at the end. I mean, I can't really say just one. I mean, there are multiple like scenes that are good in this film, but going over to you, KJ, what were some of your favorite scenes? And actually, let's go with favorite character as well.
I just want to make sure everyone can hear me. But no, my favorite scenes in this movie, I'll pick three. My first favorite scene is the scene where Captain Hepburn first meets John Prentice. That's my first favorite scene, when she first meets John. My second favorite scene is, of course, when she fires Hillary. My third favorite scene, I'm going to say, is the ending, the monologue by Spencer Tracy. Those are my three favorite scenes. We've already spoken about most of them, so I don't really have anything to add there. But in terms of my favorite characters, that's hard because I like most of them. You know, it's pretty hard. But if I had to just pick two, I would say my favorite characters are Spencer Tracy's character, and I want to say Sidney Poitier's mother's character are my two favorite characters in the film, because to me, they're both the conscience of the film in a sense. But those are my two favorite characters.
Okay. Going over to you, Boris. If you could choose a favorite scene and a favorite character.
As KJ says, it's really difficult to pick only one. I'm sorry. Can you all hear me while I hear some noise all of a sudden when I speak?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. So it's really difficult to pick only one, both in terms of the favorite character and the favorite scene. Now, I have three favorite scenes. One would definitely be when John confronted his father. One, the final speech, of course, and one when John's mother spoke to Joanna's father. I actually found it very impressive how she was brave enough to speak so straightforwardly with complete honesty to someone she had never spoken to before, someone she had never met before. I really liked the level of communication skills she showed at that moment, how she wasn't afraid to speak her honest mind, which is a quality I always appreciate and respect in people. I mean, in real life too. It's one of my favorite human qualities in general. Now, as far as the scene of John confronting his father goes, I already said everything I was going to say. And about the final speech, one thing I really wanted to point out, one thing I liked a lot about this movie is how in this final speech, the message we get is that not only it's okay for people of different races to be together in a relationship, to get married, and so on. At the end, the point it makes is that that doesn't even need to be pointed out. Like, it's obvious that it's okay, that it doesn't even have to be said. But the point that Joanna's father makes here is that even if some people don't agree with it, even if some people think it's wrong, we shouldn't pay that much attention to what people think to begin with. And that's the point I really liked that he made. And this message that the movie brings, that we should just be true to ourselves as long as we aren't doing any harm to anyone else. And as long as we can say that we don't harm anyone else by being what we are and doing what makes us happy, then who cares what anyone else thinks? and that's the message I really liked, and especially the fact that that message was made so many years ago when this movie was made. I think that's really great. And as far as who my favorite character would be, that's difficult to choose as well. I would have to choose between Joanna's mother and John's mother, although Joanna's father also became a very impacting character with the speech he held at the end. So, yeah, it's difficult to choose.
Okay. Going over to Tammy, if you could pick a favorite scene or a favorite character, what would you choose?
Well, I have one favorite scene that nobody really mentioned, but I did. I don't know why I really liked it when the nanny tied into John when she came in the room, and she really tied into him. And then, even at the end, she's like, "And you're not even that good looking," after she tied into him.
That was good.
I thought that was a good scene, and I definitely liked when Hillary got fired. That was the way she did it. Now I want you to go back to the and I want you to make out a check for $5,000. Then I want you to do this, and she did it just so perfect. And Hillary was just sitting there in the car like, what?
Duh, 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 duh.
And then of course the ending speech is, that is just phenomenal. It that just was great. My favorite characters is, I'd have to say, the priest is one of my favorite characters because I think in a way he held everything together because his way of thinking, he was so open, but yet he saw the points everybody was making. And I really liked how he just, kind of tried to keep everything nice and on an even keel and smooth and let everybody say how they felt, but they all listened to what he said too. And of course, John, I really, really liked John. I liked how he presented himself in every situation. I liked, his way of thinking. I liked how he was never, he was never arrogant, and he never made himself be lower than anybody else either. He knew where he was in his stage of life and where he was in this stage of society, or where he felt he should be, and he was going to stick to it. I really liked his character.
And I think that plays in favor to him in the end too. I think KJ kind of hit it on the nose, where they kind of like based it on his real life, real thought actions, to an extent where it's almost autobiographical in a sense, to what kind of a person he was at that stage in life. So, but I did want to say something to the music involved. There was in fact a song that was sung by a chorus in the beginning. It was sung by Jacqueline Fontaine at the restaurant while they were having drinks with their friends, and it was sung off screen during the closing credits as well, and played in the score as well throughout. So I did. That's the glory of love. The whole. You need to talk a little. I think it kind of went well with the film too. I mean, I suppose at least they didn't have Ebony and Ivory live together in perfect harmony. At least they didn't have that one. but I think that it very well went with the film and things of that nature. What did y'all think about the music? Did y'all feel like the music went well with the film? The score, in fact.
Well, yeah, I did think so. I definitely noticed that song as it appeared multiple times throughout the movie, and yeah, it's a nice song, and I do think it goes pretty well with the movie.
Well, and the composer of the music that for this particular film, it was done by Frank Duvall. He was slightly before this film. He was in the he did the music or he composed the music to the Dirty Dozen, which some of us do know that particular film. He also did the music to the Flight of the Phoenix, Cat Ballou. So he definitely had some westerns under his belt. He also did the music to Send Me No Flowers with Rock Hudson and McClintock. He did the music to that. Under the Yum Yum Tree. Definitely some good ones there. Definitely with Doris Day and The Thrill of It All. Also goes as far back as 1954, but he wasn't until known until Kiss Me Deadly and Pillow Talk was his when he started to get more known. So I guess with Rock Hudson and Doris Day, he got his start out on. So and then so that's kind of interesting to know. But in any case, I think at this point in time we'll do our outros, unless there is anything else that anyone wants to say about the film. Okay, then I shall go to KJ and ask him to tell us about a little bit about who he is and what he does.
Well, right now I am working on some things. Hopefully, I can disclose a little bit more on it in the future. Hopefully, at some point this year. But I do at this moment have a film group. We have about close to 2,000 members. It's called Timeless Classic Movies and Television. You can find us on Facebook if you're interested in it. And if I see that you have requested out, I'll make sure to be on this week to let people in. But yeah, that's me. Other than that, I'm trying to catch a good movie. But I do want to say thank you to David for having me on.
Definitely. And I was wondering if we actually did Guess Who next week, would you be willing to come back for that?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So going over to Boris, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Hi. My real name is Philip, as some of you possibly know. Boris is my nickname coming from the role I played in a short movie in Joe Sherlock's anthology called Dark Zone 13. I'm a big fan of horror movies, as you know, but sometimes it's also nice to watch and discuss a movie that's not horror that I would have probably never discovered if it wasn't for you guys. This movie is a perfect example of that. I'm also a writer, so far unpublished, unfortunately, aside the poetry book I have on. Yes?
Yep, I was going to say something about your poetry book.
What were you going to say about it?
I was going to say that you are a published poet, as far as I know. on Amazon Kindle, where you can download his book of poetry, which is called Baphomet. What?
Baphomet and duality. I'll type it on my phone and show you in case anyone wants to look it up on Amazon.
Sure. While you're doing that, I'll go over to Tammy, and you'll be able to show us in a moment. Tammy, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do? Very cool.
Well, everybody knows by now, I think, that I am your fiance. I get into checking out the different movies and talking about them and learning different aspects that people look at when they're watching them from the different people that are on the show. And I collect movies myself. I collect a lot of music myself. And in the summertime, I have fun with my 1972 Grand Prix.
Very cool. And my name is David Streggy. I'm one of the founding fathers of Inside Movies Galore. But I also, right now, we're on Delusions of Grandeur. And we podcast here. We podcast on Inside. And I interview people from time to time on that particular channel. But I moonlight under Delusions of Grandeur, where I go on about different films that I've picked up and go on and express my own opinions from time to time. So definitely check out some of those viewpoints and some of those videos. And hopefully we'll be back next week with the remake of this movie. I figured while we're discussing this film, we might as well discuss its predecessor, even though it may not be as classic. It was definitely more of a recent film. It's called Guess Who. So next week we'll be going on same time, and we'll be bringing you some more cool discussion for you. So thank you so much. Enjoy your afternoon, and hopefully come back and let us know down in the comments what you thought of the film, if you've seen it, what some of your opinions were, and whether you'll actually go out and see it and give it a watch. So thank you so much and enjoy. We'll definitely be back. Say good night or good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Good night.
Good night.
Night night.